Ethan had always been curious about the alien settlement on the outskirts of the city. He had heard rumors, stories told by friends who were too frightened to go near. It was known for its strange, colorful markets and the mysterious creatures that lived there. Many people stayed away, unsure of what to expect. But Ethan wasn't like the others. He was curious, adventurous, wanted to learn more about the beings that had come from far away. One warm evening, after finishing a long shift at work, Ethan decided to visit the settlement. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden glow over the marketplace. As he walked through the bustling streets, his eyes widened with wonder. The air was filled with the sounds of chatter in various languages, alien and human alike. The vendors called out, selling exotic foods, strange trinkets, and glowing crystals that seemed to pulse with a light of their own. Ethan wandered deeper into the market, his gaze moving from one stall to another, taking in the sights and smells. But it was something else that caught his attention. Someone who stood out in the crowd. She was tall, with long flowing hair that shimmered in the fading sunlight. Her skin was a pale, almost silvery hue, and her eyes bright, intense, and deep blue seemed to see straight through him. She wore an elegant, simple dress that flowed around her as she moved, giving her an ethereal, almost otherworldly presence. There was something about her, a kind of quiet strength, mixed with a softness that made Ethan's heart race. He couldn't look away. As she walked past him, Ethan found himself instinctively taking a step toward her. His heart pounded in his chest as if something invisible was pulling him closer. He didn't know why, but the moment he saw her, he felt drawn to her in a way that he couldn't explain. She turned her head and caught his gaze. For a split second, their eyes locked, and Ethan felt a connection, something unspoken, something powerful. The woman stopped. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with an expression that was both curious and wary. There was a brief pause, the sound of the busy market continuing around them, but it felt like time slowed down just for the two of them. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft yet firm with an accent that was unfamiliar to him. Ethan's heart raced. He had never been good at talking to strangers, especially not to someone as striking as her. But there was something about her, something that made him want to speak, to make a connection. He cleared his throat and smiled awkwardly. "I was just admiring the market," he said, trying to sound casual. "It's all so different from what I'm used to." She nodded, her eyes softening. "It is unlike your world, isn't it?" Ethan chuckled nervously. "Yeah, it's definitely not what I imagined." He paused, feeling more confident now that she seemed more at ease. "Are you from around here?" The woman smiled, a small, knowing smile that hinted at something deeper. "I come from a far-off place," she said. "But for now, this is my home." Ethan was intrigued. That's amazing. I've never met anyone from another world before." "I'm not so different," she said, her voice calm and gentle. "We all have the same feelings, the same hopes, no matter where we come from." Ethan smiled, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. He wanted to ask her more questions to learn about her world, but he was also aware of the strange tension between them. It was as if, in that moment, nothing else mattered. "Would you like to join me for a walk?" he asked before he could stop himself. His words felt bold, but his heart was in the right place. "I don't really know much about this place, and you seem like you do." The woman's eyes studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his request. Finally, she nodded. "A walk would be nice." "No." And so, they began walking together through the market. The more they walked, the more he realized how natural it felt to be with her. They talked about their worlds, their experiences, and their hopes for the future. It was as if they were two old friends, reunited after years of separation, even though they had only just met. As the night grew darker, the market lights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the streets. Ethan glanced at her again, and he couldn't help but notice the way she looked at him. There was a certain depth in her gaze, softness mixed with something he couldn't quite place. They stopped at a quiet corner of the market, away from the crowds. The air was cooler now, and the stars were beginning to twinkle overhead. Ethan turned to her, his heart racing once more. "I'm Ethan," he said, offering his hand. She looked at it for a moment before taking it gently in her own. "Lyra," she replied, her grip firm but warm. And just like that, simple handshake marked the beginning of something unexpected. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't have imagined. Over. The next few weeks, Ethan and Lyra continued to meet, and their connection grew stronger with each passing day. What began as a casual conversation in the market quickly blossomed into something much deeper. They spent hours together, walking through the city, sharing stories of their worlds, and learning about each other in ways neither had expected. Ethan found himself drawn to Lyra's wisdom and quiet strength. She spoke of her people with a sense of pride and longing, explaining how her kind, though peaceful, had been through hardships that made them stronger. Lyra's words were often laced with stories of distant planets and cultures that Ethan could hardly imagine. Her voice, calm and soft, made him feel as if he were hearing the most beautiful song every time she spoke. One evening, after a long day of exploring the city together, they sat on a park bench overlooking a lake, watching the reflection of the city lights dance across the water. Ethan glanced at Lyra, her eyes sparkling as the stars began to appear in the sky above. He couldn't help but wonder about her life, her experiences, what it must be like to come from such a distant world. "Lyra," he began, his voice quiet, "what's it really like? Where you come from?" She turned to him, her gaze thoughtful. "It's not so different from Earth, I think," she said softly. "We've always longed for peace, for harmony, but sometimes it's hard to find, my people. We've learned to survive, but we've also learned to appreciate the little things, the moments of peace we get." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He could see the depth of her words, the weight they carried. But he also realized there was something more beneath the surface. Lyra was not just sharing stories from her past, she was revealing pieces of herself. She had allowed him into a part of her world that few others ever had the chance to see. "Sounds like it's been a hard journey for you," Ethan said gently. "But you seem strong. I don't think I've met anyone like you." Lyra's smile was small, but it was filled with warmth. "You're kind, Ethan. But strength doesn't always mean we're not struggling inside. Sometimes we hide it, just like everyone else." There was a pause as Ethan absorbed her words. He felt an overwhelming desire to comfort her, to show her that she wasn't alone. He didn't have all the answers, but he wanted to try. They sat in silence for a few moments, the peaceful sounds of the city surrounding them. Ethan could feel his heart beating a little faster. His thoughts were clouded with an unfamiliar feeling, something between tenderness and longing. As the evening turned to night, they stood and walked toward the street. The lights of the city glowed softly around them, and Ethan couldn't help but notice how natural it felt to be by Lyra's side. It wasn't just her beauty that captured his attention. It was the way she made him feel a sense of calm, of connection, as if he were exactly where he was supposed to be. "I'm glad we met, Lyra," Ethan said as they neared the end of the park. "I've never felt so understood before. Like I'm not just some stranger to you." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. "I feel the same way. It's not often that we find someone who can truly understand us. Someone who doesn't judge, but listens." Ethan smiled, the warmth in his chest spreading. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't just drifting through life. With Lyra, everything seemed to make sense. They were two people from different worlds, yet they shared something deeper than either could explain. The next few days were filled with more shared moments. Lyra invited Ethan to visit her living space, a simple but beautiful area located on the outskirts of the city, away from the busy streets. Her home was filled with strange, beautiful objects from her world's soft fabrics. Colorful stones and paintings that seemed to tell stories of ancient times. Ethan marveled at everything, asking questions and learning more about Lyra's culture. It was clear that she had an appreciation for the small, quiet beauty in life. One evening, as they sat together, Lyra took Ethan's hand in hers. Her touch was gentle, her fingers cool to the touch, but comforting. For a moment, neither of them spoke, but the silence between them felt comfortable, not awkward. "Ethan," she said quietly, I've never known someone like you before. You've shown me kindness without asking for anything in return. It's not something I'm used to." Ethan turned to her, feeling his heart beat a little faster. "I want to be here for you, Lyra. I want to understand you, everything about you. I don't need anything in return, just to be with you." Her gaze softened, and she looked away for a moment, as though she were thinking deeply. Then she turned back to him, her eyes meeting his. "You make me feel things I didn't think were possible," she whispered. "I didn't think I could ever trust someone like this. But with you, I feel safe." Ethan's chest tightened with emotion, and he leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Always protect you, Lyra, no matter what." In that moment, under the soft light of her home, they both realized that their bond was growing stronger. The feelings between them were no longer just curiosity or friendship. They were something deeper, something that could change both of their lives forever, and neither of them knew what the future held. But they were ready to face it together, Ethan. And Lyra's bond had deepened in ways neither of them had expected. What started as a casual friendship had turned into something far more meaningful. They spent more and more time together, exploring not just the city, but the vast connection they shared. There were no barriers between them, just two people who understood each other in ways that went beyond words. It was a cool evening when things changed between them. Ethan had invited Lyra to a quiet cafe, a small, cozy place on the edge of the city that served coffee and pastries from across the galaxy. They had been meeting here for the past few days, and it had become their place where they could talk without anyone interrupting, without the noise of the world pulling them apart. This evening, however, something felt different. As they sat across from each other, the usual easy conversation seemed to have slowed. There was a new tension in the air, one that neither of them had experienced before. Lyra looked at Ethan, her eyes full of something deeper than just friendship. She had always been guarded, always keeping her true feelings hidden behind a calm exterior. But tonight, she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. She had grown so close to him in such a short time, and it had begun to feel like they were no longer just two people from different worlds. They had become something more, partners in a way. But there was still a part of her that held back, unsure if it was right to allow herself to feel so much. Ethan, on the other hand, had started to notice the way his heart raced when she was near. Every time she smiled or laughed, it felt like the world became a little brighter. He had never imagined that he would form such a deep connection with someone so different, so mysterious. But with Lyra, it felt natural. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. The way she made him feel was something he couldn't explain. The silence between them stretched for a moment, each of them unsure of what to say next. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Ethan," she began, "I don't know what this is between us. It feels so different from anything I've ever known," looking down at the table for a moment before meeting his eyes again. "I've never felt this. Connected to someone." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had been feeling the same way, but hearing her say it out loud made everything feel more real. "I feel it too," he said quietly. "It's hard to explain. But with you, everything just feels right." Lyra smiled softly, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "But I'm not like you, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I come from a world far away. My people, my culture, we're so different. I'm afraid that one day the differences between us will be too much." Ethan reached across the table and gently took her hand, his touch warm and comforting. "I don't care about the differences, Lyra," he said firmly. "We're together because we want to be, because we understand each other. That's all that matters." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time Ethan saw a flicker of vulnerability in her. She had always been so strong, so composed, but now he could see the uncertainty that lay beneath her calm exterior. She had carried the weight of her past for so long, and now, with Ethan, she was beginning to let go of some of that weight. Without thinking, Ethan leaned forward and gently kissed her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a promise. He wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't leaving her. For a moment, Lyra just stared at him, her eyes wide with surprise. Then she slowly stood up, pulling Ethan to his feet. Her movements were graceful, almost as if she were in a trance. Without saying a word, she led him to the door, and they stepped out into the cool night air. The city was quiet now, the streets empty and peaceful. Lyra didn't speak as she led him down the darkened path toward her home. Ethan followed, his heart racing. He had no idea what she was thinking, but he was willing to follow her anywhere. There was a deep trust between them, something that neither of them had ever experienced before. When they reached her home, Lyra turned to face him. The soft light from the nearby street lamp illuminated her features, making her look even more beautiful than before. Her eyes met his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with anticipation, the unspoken understanding that something was about to change. "Ethan," she whispered, "are you sure about this?" He didn't hesitate. "Right, I'm sure." And with that, Lyra closed the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss, soft and tentative at first, but growing deeper as the moments passed. It was a kiss filled with longing, with a connection that neither could explain but both felt with every fiber of their being as they pulled away. Breathless, Lyra looked into Ethan's eyes, her heart pounding. "I've never felt like this before," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "But I'm not afraid anymore." Ethan smiled, his heart full of warmth. "Neither am I." In that moment, they both knew that their bond was no longer just a friendship. It had crossed into something deeper, something that neither of them could ignore. And though they didn't know what the future would bring, they were ready to face it together, no matter what. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan and Lyra's relationship deepened in ways neither of them had anticipated. They were no longer just two people from different worlds. They had become partners, relying on each other in ways that felt both comforting and challenging. Their bond, though strong, was not without its difficulties. One of the biggest challenges was the cultural divide. Lyra's people, though peaceful, had a way of life that was vastly different from Ethan's. The more they spent time together, the more Ethan realized how little he knew about the alien customs that shaped Lyra's world. One afternoon, as they sat in Lyra's home, sipping a warm drink that she had introduced him to, the conversation turned serious. Lyra's expression grew more thoughtful as she placed her cup down and looked at Ethan. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but filled with a sense of concern. "There's something I need to explain to you about my people. It's not something I've shared with you yet, but I think you need to know." Ethan, sensing the change in her tone, set his own cup down and turned to face her. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently, wanting to listen and understand. Lyra took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. "Where I come from, relationships like ours, they are not looked upon favorably. My people value tradition, and most of them believe that mixing with other species, especially humans, can lead to trouble. It's not something they easily accept." Ethan's heart sank. He had always known that Lyra's world was different, but hearing her speak so plainly about the challenges they would face made everything feel more real. He hadn't fully considered the social pressures that came with their relationship. "Didn't want to tell you this before," Lyra continued, her eyes filled with uncertainty, "but I need you to understand that our bond might bring danger to both of us. There are those who might want to separate us, or worse, harm us because we're together." Ethan's mind raced as he absorbed her words. He could see the fear in her eyes, and it hurt him to know that their love was something that could put both of them in jeopardy. He had always known that being with her might not be easy, but he hadn't realized just how much they would have to fight against. "Understand, Lyra," Ethan said, his voice firm but compassionate. "But no matter what, I'm not going to let anything come between us. We'll face whatever comes together." Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face, looking for the truth in his words. After a long moment, she nodded, her expression softening. "I wish it were that simple, Ethan, but it's not just about us. It's about the people I care about, the ones who might be hurt because of this." Ethan reached out and took her hand, his grip gentle but reassuring. "We'll figure it out. We have to. I don't care about what other people think, Lyra. What matters to me is you. I want to be with you, and I'm willing to fight for that." For a moment, Lyra didn't say anything, She simply looked at him as though trying to find the right words. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter now. "I've never met anyone like you, Ethan," she said softly. "You don't care about the rules, the expectations. You just care about what's real." Ethan smiled, squeezing her hand. "I care about you, Lyra, and that's all that matters." But as much as Ethan tried to reassure her, the weight of their situation didn't fade. They both knew that their love would be tested, not just by the challenges they faced in each other's worlds, but by the very people they cared about. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself more rueful. Kativi, he knew that Lyra was right. There were risks. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that their relationship might not just be a personal struggle, it could become a political one, if Lyra's people truly disapproved of their bond. There was no telling how far they might go to stop it. But he didn't want to focus on the fear. He wanted to focus on what brought them together, on the moments they shared, the quiet evenings, the laughter, the conversations that made the distance between their worlds feel smaller. One evening, as the sun began to set and the city lights flickered on, Ethan took Lyra's hand and led her to the rooftop of his apartment building. The view was breathtaking. The city stretched out before them, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. "I want to make this work, Lyra," Ethan said, looking out over the city. "No matter what, I'm not going to let go of us. I want you in my life forever." Lyra smiled, her heart touched by his words. "I want that too, Ethan, but we need to be ready for what's ahead. We'll need to be strong together." Ethan turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. "We'll face it all together. I'm not going anywhere." And though they both knew that the future held many unknowns, they also knew that they were ready to face whatever came next. They had each other, and that was enough for now. They had crossed a line between friendship and love, and they were willing to fight for that love no matter what it took as the days passed. The weight of their situation began to settle in. Lyra and Ethan had come to a crossroads, one that neither of them had expected. The love they shared was undeniable, but the challenges were growing. Lyra's people were watching closely, their opinions shifting from curious to hostile, and it was clear that their relationship was causing tension between not only their worlds, but also the people closest to them. But despite the pressure, Ethan never wavered. He stood firm in his commitment to Lyra, even when doubts crept in, and the world around them seemed to be closing in. His love for her had only grown stronger, and he would do whatever it took to protect their bond. One evening, after a long day of quiet discussions and moments of reflection, Lyra invited Ethan to meet her in a small garden near her home. It was a place she often visited when she needed time to think. A peaceful retreat where the sound of water flowing from a small fountain created a calming atmosphere. She had told him that she wanted to talk about something important, something that had been on her mind for a while. When Ethan arrived, he found Lyra sitting on a bench under the shade of a large tree. She looked calm, but there was a certain sadness in her eyes. As he approached, she looked up and smiled softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. He could tell that something was bothering her, and it made his chest tighten with concern. "Lyra," he said gently, sitting beside her on the bench. "What's wrong? You've been quiet lately." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared at the water flowing gently in the fountain, lost in thought. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about us. And I realize that I've never truly given you the full picture of what this relationship might mean for you." Ethan frowned, unsure of what she meant. "What do you mean? I don't want to hold you back," she said, her voice filled with a quiet sadness. "Being with me, being with someone like me, means you will face things that no human has ever faced. The weight of two worlds, two cultures, two sets of expectations, it's more than anyone should have to carry. I don't want you to feel like you have to fight for us." Ethan's heart ached at her words. He could hear the pain in her voice, the sense of guilt she was carrying. He reached out, taking her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "Lyra," he said softly, his voice full of emotion, "I want to be with you. No matter what comes, no matter what we face, I want to be with you. I don't care about the pressure from your people or the challenges we might face in the future. All I care about is you." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away, trying to maintain her composure. "But I can't ask you to give up your life for me," she whispered. "I can't ask you to abandon everything you know just to be with someone from another world." Ethan was silent for a moment, his thoughts racing. He had never felt more sure of anything in his life than he did now. He knew that being with Lyra was the right thing for him, that their love was worth fighting for, even if it meant facing hardships that no one could have prepared them for. "I'm not giving up anything," Ethan said firmly. "What I have with you isn't a sacrifice, Lyra. It's a choice. A choice I made because I want to be with you. I'm not turning away from this, and I'm not walking away from you. You and me. We're in this together." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening, and for a moment the weight of her worries seemed to lift. She leaned her head against his shoulder, taking comfort in his warmth, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her. They sat in silence for a while, the peaceful sound of the water in the fountain helping to calm their minds. After a few moments, Lyra spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you, something I've been afraid to say. But now, I think it's time." Ethan looked at her, his heart beating faster. "What is it?" Lyra took a deep breath, as though gathering the strength to say what had been on her mind for so long. "Ethan, I want to build a future with you. I want to see where this can go, no matter what happens. And I think it's time for us to take the next step." Ethan's eyes widened slightly, his heart filling with hope. "What do you mean?" Lyra looked at him, her gaze steady and filled with determination. "I want to have a family with you. I know it might be impossible for us to fully understand each other's worlds, but I want to try. I want to create something new, something that represents the love we share, something that combines both of our cultures." Ethan felt as though the world had shifted beneath his feet. The idea of starting a family with Lyra, of creating a life together, filled him with a sense of awe and excitement that he hadn't expected. The challenges they faced, the differences between their worlds, it didn't matter anymore. They had found something rare and beautiful, and he was ready to embrace it fully. "I want that too, Lyra," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I want to build a life with you, a life that's ours." Lyra smiled, the tears in her eyes now replaced with a look of hope. "Then let's make it happen, together." As they sat there holding each other, they knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. A chapter full of hope, love, and the promise of a future that was all their own. They'd crossed the first difficult bridge, and now they were ready to face whatever came next together. The days following Lyra's confession were filled with uncertainty. Ethan and Lyra had agreed on their future together, starting a family, building a life. But the path ahead was not as simple as they had hoped. The bond they shared, while strong, was still under pressure from both their worlds. Lyra's people had grown increasingly uneasy about their relationship, and whispers of disapproval were starting to grow louder. Ethan knew that things would never be easy. He had always understood that being with Lyra would come with challenges, but the reality of facing the disapproval of an entire species was something he hadn't fully prepared for. Yet, despite the tension, Ethan remained resolute. He had made a promise to Lyra, and he intended to keep it. One afternoon, Lyra arrived at Ethan's apartment, looking more troubled than he had ever seen her. Her usual calm demeanor had been replaced by an obvious tension, her eyes filled with worry. As soon as she stepped inside, she paced for a moment before turning to face him. "Ethan," she began, her voice heavy with concern, "I've just received word from my people. They want to meet with us." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean, meet with us?" "They want to discuss our future," she replied, her tone strained. "They're not happy about our relationship." For us to be separated, Ethan's heart sank. He had feared this moment would come, but hearing it out loud made the reality hit him hard. He stepped closer to Lyra, taking her hands in his. "We can't let them tear us apart, Lyra. We've worked too hard for this." "I know," Lyra said, her voice trembling slightly. "But the pressure is becoming unbearable. There are those who say it's against the laws of my people for us to be together. Some even think that our union could bring chaos to the galaxy. Ethan felt a surge of frustration. He couldn't understand how people could be so close-minded. It didn't matter where Lyra came from or what her people believed. He loved her. That was all that mattered. "We can't let them win, Lyra," Ethan said firmly. "We can't let anyone make decisions about our lives. This is about you and me. It's not about what they think. We've made it this far, and we can make it through this too." Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, she seemed unsure, as if she were weighing the risks. "I'm scared, Ethan," she whispered. "Scared of what might happen if we defy them. What if it puts you in danger? What if it makes things worse?" Ethan cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumb brushing against her soft skin. "Lyra, I'll always protect you, no matter what. We can't let fear control us. If we do that, we'll never truly be free." She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She opened them again. There was a sense of determination in her gaze. "You're right," she said softly. "We can't let fear take over. I've spent my life living in fear of what others might think. But I want to live for us now, Ethan. For what we've built together." Ethan smiled, feeling a rush of love for her. She was strong more than she knew. Together they had already overcome so much, and he knew they could face this next challenge as well. "Then let's face them together," Ethan said, his voice filled with conviction. "We'll go to them, we'll stand our ground, and we'll show them that we're not afraid. We'll show them that love is more powerful than any law or tradition." Lyra nodded, her resolve strengthening with every word. "I won't let them tear us apart. I love you, Ethan, and that's all that matters." The next day, they traveled to the meeting place, a neutral location between the two worlds, where representatives from both Lyra's people and the human delegation had gathered. As they arrived, Ethan could feel the tension in the air. The silence was thick, and many of the alien faces present looked at them with suspicion and curiosity. Lyra stood beside Ethan, her hand firmly clasped in his. Together they walked into the room, the weight of their decision heavy in their hearts. The alien leaders, who had once been kind and welcoming to Lyra, now regarded them both with a coldness that made Ethan's stomach twist. The meeting began with one of the leaders speaking first. "Lyra, Ethan, we've called you here today to discuss the consequences of your relationship. It's clear that your bond is something neither of you can ignore. However, you must understand that it is not acceptable according to the laws of our people." Lyra's voice was steady as she responded. "I understand your concerns, but what I feel for Ethan is real. It's not something I can just turn away from. It's not something I want to hide. We deserve the chance to be together, just like anyone else." There was a moment of silence before another voice spoke, more harshly. "Your relationship could bring harm to our way of life, Lyra. There are many who disagree with this bond. They believe it will cause unrest among our people." Ethan stood taller, his voice clear and unwavering. "I don't care about your laws. I care about Lyra, and she cares about me. Our love is real, and it's not something that should be dictated by fear or outdated traditions." The room grew quiet. It seemed as though no one knew how to respond. Lyra's people were not accustomed to such boldness from a human, but Ethan wasn't backing down, not for Lyra, and not for their future. "We're willing to fight for this," he said, his gaze steady. "We'll fight for our right to be together, no matter what it takes." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, one of the leaders stood, his expression unreadable. "We will take your words into consideration," he said, his tone calmer. "But no, your actions will not go without consequence." As they left the meeting, the weight of the situation hung heavily between them. But Lyra squeezed Ethan's hand, her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing by me." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "We're in this together, Lyra, and we'll make it through." They didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. They would face it as a team. United by their love, the meeting with the alien leaders had left both Lyra and Ethan with heavy hearts. But it also brought clarity. They had made their stand, and though the future was uncertain, they knew they could not turn back. The tension between their people had not disappeared, but something had shifted within both of them. They were no longer afraid of what lay ahead, no longer worried about the obstacles that seemed impossible to overcome after that day. Lyra and Ethan spent more time in each other's company, supporting one another and finding strength in the quiet moments they shared. The world outside may have been full of conflict and pressure, but together, they had found a sanctuary in each other's presence one morning. As they sat on the balcony of Ethan's apartment, watching the sun rise over the city, Lyra turned to him with a thoughtful look on her face. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft, "I've been thinking a lot about what's next for us. I don't want to just survive through this. I want to build something new, something beautiful." Ethan smiled at her, his heart swelling with affection. "I've been thinking the same thing," he said. "We've already been through so much. But I don't want this to just be about fighting. I want it to be about living, about creating something good." Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I want that too," she said quietly. "I want to build a future with you. A future that's ours, no matter what anyone else thinks." Their conversation drifted into silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people share a deep understanding, when words are no longer necessary. They sat together, letting the warmth of the morning sun wash over them, both knowing that the path ahead would not be easy. But they were ready to face it side by side. As the days passed, they started to take steps toward their new future. Lyra began reaching out to those in her community who were more open-minded, trying to build support for their relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were still many who opposed the idea of humans and aliens coming together, but slowly, Lyra found others who were willing to listen. She shared her story and Ethan's, explaining how their love was not about defying the rules, but about finding something pure in a world full of uncertainty. Ethan, too, found ways to contribute. He spoke. Two humans who had lived among aliens, trying to create understanding and empathy between the two races. He knew that the only way to move forward was by creating connections, showing people that love and acceptance were more powerful than division and fear. One evening, as they sat together in the quiet of Ethan's apartment, Lyra turned to him. With a bright smile on her face, "Ethan, I've been thinking," she said excitedly. "What if we could start something for both our people? A place where humans and aliens could come together, share their cultures, and learn from each other?" Ethan's eyes lit up at the idea. "You mean like a community? A space where everyone can feel accepted, no matter where they come from?" "Yes," Lyra said, her enthusiasm growing. "A place where we can show that despite our differences, we have more in common than we realize. A place where love, kindness, and respect are the foundation." Ethan thought about it for a moment. It was a big idea, a bold one, but it felt right. It felt like something they both could work toward, something that would not only create a future for them, but for others like them, who were caught between two worlds. "I love that idea," Ethan said, his voice full of excitement. "Good. Start small. Create a space for people to meet and talk, and then grow from there. It could be a place of healing where we can bridge the gap between our people." Lyra nodded, her eyes shining with hope. "We've already started building something between us, Ethan. Now we can build something for everyone." With that, they set to work. They began speaking with others in their respective communities, gathering support for their vision. It wasn't easy, and there were many moments of doubt, but they kept moving forward, knowing that they were creating something that could change the future for both humans and aliens alike. One afternoon, as they walked through the city, Ethan noticed a small cafe on a quiet corner, its windows lined with plants and lights. He stopped, turning to Lyra with a grin on his face. "What do you think?" he asked, pointing to the cafe. "Do you think this could be the first step? A place where people from different worlds can come together and just talk?" Lyra looked at the cafe, her heart swelling with the possibility. She took his hand and smiled. "I think it's perfect." Together they walked into the cafe, ready to start building the future they had dreamed of. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more challenges ahead. But in that moment, with the sun shining down on them and the sound of the city buzzing around them, they knew that they were ready to take on whatever the world had to offer as they sat down at a small table. "Hand in hand," Lyra whispered, We've already started, Ethan. This is just the beginning. And for the first time in a long while, they both felt truly hopeful. They were building something that would last, something that could change everything.